there actually is no evidence whatsoever.
Now, just let me add to that, too. The prior piece that you played where they were talking about the gold dinar, for people to understand that if there were an African currency, gold-backed African currency no less, but even just an African currency printed in Africa, that would mean that the African economy, which is this resource-rich continent that everyone has been sucking the blood out of, human blood, resource blood, for, 5 centuries now, that would finally be under the control of the African people. And this was a project that was underway and that was being led and funded by Gaddafi. And at the same time that this project is going forward, he's doing this kind of organizing on the continent. You can imagine, of course, what that means to the colonial powers that have plans for the resources and the people of Africa that don't include them making any decisions.
What's interesting...
I have a question for Mahdi to bring this all together, which he can sort of help us with. And for me, there's been this allusion to Libya being a part of the Arab Spring. With the information that was given by Wesley Clark, the presence of the finance by the National Endowment for Democracy and other Western organizations through NGOs that helped all of this to take place. Where does Libya fit in to what has become known as the Arab Spring?
Well, first, this is not an issue about democracy. It is not about Arab agency. They used human rights, as I said, and the notion that people are struggling for democracy as a pretext. It's very clear now. It should be very clear to everybody that this was pre-planned. We have the minutes. We have the conference papers that they're talking about a transitional council about. They're talking about, they funded this. The National Endowment for Democracy, for example, in 2006 talked about decentralizing Libya. It is Chatham House. They all talk about a transitional council. Meetings were going on since 1990, and the current oil and finance minister for the transitional council was at all these meetings. He was at every single meeting about regime change in Libya by the so-called Libyan opposition, by the Libyan Salvation Front. These people. So this is not an Arab Spring. Of course, there's people that are unhappy, and I think the leader of the Nation of Islam put it very well. In every country, there are people who are upset. People are always upset about something, but there's certain people that are very conniving, and they go into these countries and they utilize those internal tensions, and they try to manipulate it and use it for their own interests, and that's what they're doing in Libya and the Arab world. Believe me, because an Arab Spring is not going to be. It's not going to be brought by NATO. Democracy is not going to be brought by NATO bombs.
Okay, we're going to take a quick station ID. We're coming back.
You're listening to KPFK 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, where there's a film showing tonight for free, The Legend of Bhagat Singh, which is the life story of India's legendary Marxist revolutionary martyr, sentenced to death for standing up to British colonialism. Doors open soon at 6 p.m. and the film begins at 7 p.m. It's at the Workers' Solidarity Center at 1905 Rodeo Road, Los Angeles, California, 90018.
Yeah, we have about 4 minutes left of the show. We're listening to Mahdi, former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney and Don DeBar. Brother Mahdi, you were continuing?
I said it, but we have to seriously hold these organizations to account that are hiding behind things like human rights, women's rights, democracy, because they actually do the opposite in these countries. All the transitional council bodies that have been established by the United States, and I'm not talking about just the one in Libya, I'm talking about in Kosovo, in Iraq, that includes the coalition, the Provisional Coalition Authority, and what was there before it. They've all lasted for a long time and privatized the resources there. They've privatized the infrastructure, and they've broken down the social programs. These are colonial administrations. You know, and in Afghanistan, the same thing's going on as well. There's privatization in NATO-occupied Afghanistan, which is resource-rich, but it hasn't been developed. And since I brought up the issue of development, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in a tangent. I have to say something since we were talking about Africa. The Minister of International Cooperation for Libya, at a meeting with me and others at the Libyan Foreign Ministry, and the Director for the Libyan Foreign Investments made it very clear that the United States and certain Western European countries, including the European Union as a whole, told the Libyan government that they were not happy with what Libya was doing in Africa, that the development projects went against their national interests and their corporate interests in Africa. They want Africa to be a place where you can just take the resources, manufacture it outside of the continent, bring it back and sell it for 15 to 20 times what it's worth, and in the process indebt and enslave those countries further. And they were very unhappy about this, as well as other international players. And this is very important to understand, because this war in Libya has caused famine in other parts of Africa, and it's also stopped development projects, frozen them, stopped them in their tracks in other parts of Africa. And people in other parts of Africa have lost their jobs, you know, and like it was amazing to see how foreign workers were treated in Libya from other parts of Africa, from Asia and Eastern Europe. They were treated very well, and I'd never seen it before in another. I haven't seen it at all to the level of the treatment they received in Libya. Like Filipino workers were free to dress the way they would in their own country, and they weren't suppressed. And I spoke to them about how they were treated, and they went to other countries like Lebanon, the UAE, Qatar, and they said those places are horrendous, but here it's very different. We can settle down, we can build lives here.
Just to contextualize it, when Mahdi said that people are starving to death in Africa, developmental projects have stopped, what he's referring to is that Libya, with the billions of dollars of oil wealth, was channeling that oil wealth for the development of Africa, particular projects in the states of Africa, financing programs to stop famine, financing electrical infrastructure development throughout Africa. That's what he's referring to. Go on, Brother Mahdi.
Okay, and we were talking about currency. You know, 14 countries in Africa use the franc. The French control their fiscal policy. They're de facto colonies. When somebody controls your monetary policy and your economy in such a manner, you're not independent. What type of independence is it when somebody tells you what to fiscally do? You know, your banking is very central to your sovereignty. You know, and the Gaddafi wanted to get rid of this, and the Libyans wanted to get rid of this, and other Pan-African individuals wanted to get rid of this, and the French didn't like this. This was against their turf. This is a war against Africa. It's not just against Libya, and we have to be very clear about that. We have to be very clear that Libya is opening the gateway to Africa. If this country was left alone, it would have been like what Germany was to post-World War II Europe. It would have been the engine of development in that continent. And they just halted everything in its tracks. And it was deliberate. I can tell you, for example, the French, they bombed some places. Nobody understood why those places were being bombed. They bombed certain roads, like the Saladin Highway. It was later that people found out that French companies were building telecommunication cables down there. They were almost complete.
We're out of time. We're out of time, my brother. We thank you. Brother Don, thank you very much. And Ms. McKinney, we thank you. This is part one of a series.
This is part one of a series, and we will be back next week with more from Mahdi Darius Nazemroaya.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Brother Mahdi.
Can I give you a website real quick?
Go ahead.
You go to wbaix.blogspot.com is a copy of Mahdi's report. wbaix.blogspot.com.
We thank you. I'd like to thank Sister Tanya, Tej, DJ G, Ty, and all those who made tonight's programs possible. And remember, as always, we stand ready for the revolution.